right, 25 minutes before 11 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in this Friday morning. Hope you're doing well. Robin, everybody learns differently, and I guess that's not anything anybody didn't know already. And you may even know some stories. One of the ones I wanted to kind of recall was one of my friend's daughters was not really doing that well in school, and this wouldn't have applied in our generation, but the younger generation had this thing called the internet and videos. And what he discovered was that she could learn from videos. Mm-hmm. And so while I guess the standard throughout human history is that we basically were either taught from a teacher who spoke to us, or taught by somebody who would stand with us and do whatever it is that needed to be learned, whether it was how to use a tool or how to write, mm-hmm. right? And then of course there are those who can learn from reading. And everybody's not the same, and that's why I love this topic we're going to talk about right now. David Flink is on the phone. His bio says that he was diagnosed with dyslexia and ADHD at the age of 9. I think at the age of 9, I had some kind of hyperactivity thing going on too. Not so sure. He's a member of the first generation students to receive special education services and accommodations. He's the co-founder and CEO, chief empowerment officer, that would be, of something called Eye to Eye, which I understand is a national mentoring organization for students with learning disabilities. And that's the focus of the book he has written, called Thinking Differently, an inspiring guide for parents of children with learning disabilities. David Flink, good morning, David.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on the show.
Oh, you're welcome. Where are you?
I am in New York City right now.
New York. All right. Yeah. Boy, there's a place where you're getting inundated with information. Everywhere you turn, somebody's trying to sell you something, right?
I think you get ADHD as soon as you step off the bus.
Yeah, at least the HD part of it. You get the hyperactivity thing. Exactly. Yeah, they force you into it, don't they? Did you grow up there?
I actually grew up in the South. I grew up in Atlanta.
Oh, you did? Well, Atlanta's a pretty active town, too. Yeah. So tell me about yourself first before we get into the book.
So, yeah, as you mentioned in the intro, I found out that I had dyslexia and ADHD when I was 9. And, even though it was more common to be diagnosed at the age of 9 than perhaps, the generation prior, I felt really alone. I didn't know anybody else that had a learning disability, and my parents didn't really know what to do with me. So when I got to college, I decided to start mentoring kids who had learning disabilities, and that's when my organization, Eye to Eye, began. And the book really was, it was a book I wish my parents had when I was 9. So that's why I decided to write it.
Okay, now it sounds like the conclusion is something I've wondered about a long time, is that if somebody says they have a learning disability, maybe they just have a different pathway to understanding it. I mean, as I mentioned before, if you tried to teach me how to play a musical instrument with a book, I might not get it at all. But if you sit next to me and put your hands on the instrument and show me how to put my hands on the instrument, maybe I'll get it. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, you're learning in both cases. It's just that the expected way to learn was not how I would have been successful, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a really insightful comment. And I think you're right. I mean, basically, learning disabilities, they're not so much invented in the sense that, do we all have a different way to learn? Sure. But I think the disability parts of it come into play when you're saying, well, look, there's a little third grader, and you look, Timmy, you're going to have to learn how to do this, and you're going to have to read to learn how to do this. And if Timmy's not good at reading, then Timmy's going to have a learning disability. But the reality is there's tons of ways that all of us learn.
And is that the point of the book?
That is really the point of the book. That's really the point of the book. Opening up the perspective for kids, parents, teachers, particularly parents, to see all the different ways that kids can learn and to be able to, engage in their learning in ways that feel really positive and really productive.
Now, you would think that somebody in a school, like a guidance counselor, let's say, would have some way of testing students to say, okay, this student isn't going to be the book student. This student is going to be, not that you would steer them away from learning reading, but that you might say, okay, if this student is going to learn how to, what else do we do in this world? Fix a car, let's say at high school age. Okay, fix a car.
Yep.
Forget about giving him a book. Let's just take him to a car and show him.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say that at some level schools do that. There are some tests that schools provide that will help students understand better how they learn. And in fact, some of those tests are what diagnosed kids like when I was 9 to get a label like dyslexia. But there's a lot that actually parents can do to help their kids see, oh, this is how I learn best. So, actually for me, what was funny, when I was 9 years old, and I tell some of the stories of this when I was young in the book, when I was 9 years old, I was struggling so much that I didn't read well. But I'll tell you what I learned how to do really well. I learned how to perform magic tricks. I know it's funny to think about this kid walking around pulling quarters out of people's ears.
Yeah, that's cool. I love magic tricks.
It was amazing. It was what kept my self-esteem intact. But what that moment actually taught me was that, I learn really well with my hands. I can do things with my hands. And because of that, actually, I figured out how to do other things with learning with my hands and actually helped me do really well in school. One of the best experiences I ever had in school was when I was in 10th grade. And I decided to study the physics of frisbees. I wanted to understand why do frisbees fly. And it was all with my hands. I was throwing the frisbee. I was cutting holes in the frisbee to see if that would make it fall sooner. And then I can tell you to this day exactly how a frisbee flies, all because I learned with my hands. So I think opening up those pathways.
Wow, I couldn't even tell you how a frisbee flies.
How did you, growing up, handle the anxiety of others? Because you were dealing with this, learning how to exist during life and learning things from through your disability. But then I'm sure there must have been others in your life who would get frustrated with you because you wouldn't learn the way they think you should learn. How did you deal emotionally with that?
So there were some really dark moments in my childhood, moments where I felt really, really alone. And I remember at one point I went to my parents and I said, can you drop out of school in the 6th grade? And I can't imagine how my parents felt, hearing that. And it's because I just felt so sad because I wasn't able to really do what was being asked of me every day in school. But I think I was able to ultimately succeed, going to college and graduate school. And it's because I had caring adults, actually people who just from my perspective, it felt magically appeared in my life. I remember there was a moment when a janitor in the school started playing chess with me. It was so random. I was always getting in trouble and being asked to sit in the hallway. Janitor, his name was, literally, it was a time to read out loud, and Dave would produce a fireball in the middle of class magically, and guess what happened?
Wow.
Yeah. And so I was sitting outside in a pile of dust, feeling pretty sorry for myself, thinking that I was the problem. And this janitor would come down the hall and say, fireball again. And I'd be like, yeah. And, yeah, you know it. And he'd sit down and he'd play chess with me. And just because of that, I had a higher self-esteem. And then,
sure,
I'd get asked to come back into the classroom and I'd be able to actually re-engage with the learning. So much of what I think I attribute to being able to have gotten through school has less to do with, that I had some great remediation, although I did, was that I had actually caring adults that just said, Dave, I believe in you. There's a lot of research now that says if there's a caring adult that says, I believe in you, that actually will play a greater predictor for success for a kid's life than anything else.
I love what you're saying. That is, I really think that's really true. And, I've said, you mentioned magic, and you gave me an opportunity to say something I've believed for a long time. That we used to say there were no such thing as magic words. There's no such thing. I would always say, no, there is such thing as magic words. And of course, people would kind of wait for me to say whatever stupid thing I was going to say next. And I would say, no, when a parent or somebody who was really influential to a child says, you're going to amount to nothing, well, those are magic negative words.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the exact opposite, when you say, you are so smart, you are going to go really far in this world, all of a sudden that is a magical word, because the parent or the very influential adult, usually it's the parent, but you will believe what a parent or a guardian tells you, I believe. And in your case, it happened to be a janitor, so.
Yeah.
And a lot of what I put into this book are the things, I think sometimes parents feel like, oh, the school's not doing a good enough job. Like when my kid gets home, I guess I have to teach him how to read. I guess I have to teach him how to do the math. And really the truth is there's a lot that a parent can do that can enhance what's already happening in the school. And I really tried to boil that down in this book. It's lessons that I've learned through the nonprofit that I run, and also just reflecting on my own life. I mean, I actually went back and interviewed my parents. And I said, how did this happen? How did I end up at Brown University when if you had asked me in the third grade what would happen to me, and I'd say I'd probably end up in jail because I was always getting in trouble.
Oh, wow. Yeah, the fireball thing.
Yeah, the fireball thing.
Can I
I'd like to learn that.
Yeah, I'm going to learn it too. Oh, I did a fireball thing. You want to hear what I did?
Oh, yeah, you did.
And I don't mean as a kid. I did it as an adult. I heard that you could burn coffee creamer. Have you heard this?
Really? No.
No? Oh, you didn't know this?
he's
Oh, I'm
gonna
telling
try
you.
it.
Oh, you better be careful with
He's
this one.
gonna try it.
Listen what you do. You
I
take
drink a lot of coffee, so I got to be careful. I'm listening carefully now.
and in fact, if you look at the coffee creamer thing, it says warning flammable. All right.
It's the dry stuff.
So you take the dry stuff, yeah, and you take a lighter with one hand and you light the flame, okay? And then you take a little bit of coffee creamer just between your fingers, kind of sprinkle it like pixie dust on the flame, and it'll flame up.
Yeah.
It'll flame up. So I tried it one time and it worked like magic. I said, "Whoa, that was awesome." So my son now was an adult at this time, and he came into the radio station, was working at the radio station, and I said, "You got to see this trick I can do." So I was trying it, and he kept putting the flame out. I said, "I don't know what I'm doing wrong." So then I put some coffee creamer into a styrofoam cup, and then just started pouring it on the flame, and I mean, there was a flame that went all the way.
Went up to the ceiling, burned the tile.
I mean, it was as quick as I mean, it was instant. It gone, here and gone. Yeah, you got to try this trick. I think David.
Larry, you said you might be a part of my people. I am sure you are part of my people.
So what is more? What is more? I don't think I just yelled at us. What, David? What is more of a? How do I say this? A more of a noose around your neck or an anchor? Which label is what I'm trying to get at? Was it dyslexia or was it ADHD, or were they equal? Because I hate those. I hate labels. I think they make you. I think they help you to believe what you shouldn't be believing.
Those words are definitely weighted words. I mean, I remember when I was first told, you as a little kid, I have dyslexia. I thought, well, is there like an ointment for that? Is that going to cause a rash? Like,
oh no! Yeah, I thought the same thing about circumcision. I said, oh, what does that mean, actually? So all right. So you were.
I'll pass.
So I wanted, but you know that Leonardo da Vinci was dyslexic. I mean, there's so many people who are amazingly talented, and dyslexia is part of their description.
So I actually think dyslexia, ADHD, learning differences, those words actually are better than the words that are often given for kids. Because when before I got those labels, I was given other words. I was given stupid, lazy, crazy.
Okay.
And when I was offered the label of dyslexia, ADHD, I said, "Oh, okay.
Okay, that makes sense.
That's what I have.
Yeah.
That's better than the other words that I thought I had." Mm-hmm. And what's amazing, and people don't often realize this, 1 in 5 people have a learning difference. And that's 20% of the people that you meet. So those words actually help us find each other. And when I started using those words in a positive sense, then I understood, I have a community. I have a group of people that I can relate to, and many of them, like Leonardo da Vinci, go on and do extraordinary things. And I want to be like those extraordinary people.
You also speak about the legal aspects in your book, about the legal rights, and that's something that never occurred to me.
Yeah, and I think that's also important, in thinking about the label. Parents often say, do I call it a learning disability? Do I call it a learning difference? I mean, I fundamentally believe we all have learning differences. But in the context of a school, knowing your rights and knowing if you use the word learning disability, then you have access to different supportive needs in school, that's super important. And I actually spend about a third of the book just explaining everyone's legal rights. You really need to know what your kid can receive in school.
That is a cool thing to know. Yeah, that would make the difference between night and day. Mm-hmm. David Flink is our guest. He has written this book called Thinking Differently, an inspiring guide for parents of children with learning disabilities. How long has the book been out?
It was released August 26th.
Have you had enough? Has it been out long enough that you've had some feedback from parents who've said, you know what, I really appreciate the book because, and maybe the rest of it will be my child is now in the right program and was in the wrong program up until now. Have you had that kind of feedback yet?
I have. It's been so heartening being on this book tour, and I'm still on it for the rest of the year. To get to connect with families, and I'm hearing two things loud and clear. One is, oh my gosh, I now know exactly what I need to do tomorrow to help my kid. And the second thing, and this is the part that I didn't quite expect, I spend a lot of time writing stories. I love telling stories. That's kind of how I see the world. So I spend a lot of time not just giving advice, but kind of connecting every piece of advice to a story. And the parents are starting to see themselves as these stories, their kids in these stories. And they say, oh, this is a story for my family. And I really love that. I really love that people feel like they're a part of the community in addition to knowing what they have to do tomorrow.
Should the parents, when the child starts school and they've been diagnosed, should a parent sit down one-on-one with the teacher to let them know about this so the teacher will be prepared to be able to help their child in a different way than they help the other children in the class?
Yeah. So I kind of lay out sort of the whole journey, like kind of, what to expect when you're expecting for learning disabilities. But step one, when your kid gets a diagnosis, talk to the teacher and also talk to the kid. I mean, yes, those words like dyslexia and ADHD sound scary, but a lot of times I think they actually help kids because otherwise the kids are going to just think those other stupid, lazy, crazy words, and that's way worse.
That's wow. That's very insightful, and it's something I don't think I would have realized. I think that's very smart. I think even when we say kids learn differently, I think we learn differently even in ourselves. What I mean by that is if I go in my mind back when I was a kid, I could be in one class, one subject, let me put it that way, and be so totally uninterested, and my mind will drift, and I won't hear a word the teacher says. And then I can go to another class, and I'm so interested in the subject that I'm focused on everything that the teacher is saying. Mm-hmm. And a great example, the best example I can give you, although it sounds like I'm being silly, but it's absolutely true. I had 2 years of Spanish. The first year I was horrible at it. The second year I was really good at it. Mm-hmm. The first year I had an ugly lady. The second year I had a really cute teacher. I don't know. It made a difference for me. It sounds like I'm being silly, but I don't know.
No, the research is there, and actually there's a whole chapter in the book just talking about how motivation, and this is all research, on how motivation plays a huge role in how you learn. So that doesn't surprise me in the least, and actually I would argue today, if we put you in front of two people trying to learn something, if one is more appealing to you than the other, I bet you'll learn it better.
I wonder. I'd like to try it.
Is dyslexia and ADHD something a person is born with, or can you grow up to be like 20 or 30 years old and then all of a sudden you have it?
Yeah, so in most instances you were born this way. It's actually, there's a genetic component. So there's like a 70% chance that if you have a learning disability, your kid's having a learning disability. Kind of an interesting thing that's happening now, since a lot of kids are being diagnosed, parents are like realizing that they actually have a learning disability. So it's almost like the learning disabilities are hereditary, but the kids are giving it to their parents, which is sort of funny. The other way is you can't acquire a learning disability, if you have an accident or something. Sometimes the symptoms ultimately end up looking the same as if you were born with a learning disability.
Is this
that's a little more rare, but it still happens.
Is this associated with dementia?
So
could it be?
You can look that way when you get older. Yep. In fact, most people, this is actually something I discovered sort of through the book tour, most people will ultimately have some form of a learning disability in their life. A lot of times when they get older, some of the onset of things like dementia will ultimately have the same outcomes. But for the most part, when we're talking about kids, it's really a hardwiring in the brain. And some of the advantages that come from things like dyslexia are also because your brain is wired differently. So you're really creative in one aspect and you really struggle in another. And it's really, my feeling is, let's figure out how to unwrap those gifts on the positive side.
Absolutely. Well, I love what you're saying. You're going to make such a big difference in so many lives. Sometimes when a person decides to write a book, they probably say to themselves, who's going to read this book? And I don't know if the book is going to be a million seller or not, but yours is the kind of book where if it sells one copy and one person has a life that's changed, you have done your job. Hopefully there'll be more.
You guys let me, hopefully more. And you guys let me on the air today to be able to share that message. So I just really appreciate that. I hope folks listening today find some meaning in the book and it makes a difference in their own lives.
Do you know the D in HD, which stands for disorder? I don't like that. I think hyperactivity is a quality. So it should be attention deficit, hyperactivity, quality. He's hyperactive, and it's part of him. It's one of his qualities. It's not a disorder.
Yeah. I just read an article. It's fascinating. They studied the brains of creative people. And what they found is the hardwiring of the brain for creative people looks exactly the same as the hardwiring for the brain of people with ADHD. And you think of people like Steve Jobs. How did Steve Jobs invent the iPhone? Like, how did that idea even come into his head and affect creative thinking? And so it's no wonder that so many of and he has a learning disability, or had a learning disability. So it's no wonder that so many of our creative thinkers have this different hardwiring. And I think we just have to cultivate it in our schools, because I don't want to lose those people. I want the next iPhone. I want the next.
There you go. That's right. That's right.
My life better.
Yeah.
For sure.
What is the youngest age that a child can be diagnosed? In your opinion?
Right now, the research is sort of like we can catch kids around, kindergarten, and is really, about the baseline. But we're getting to a place where we can actually do brain scans and start to see some really early signs. It's not the way that it's typically done, but I have a feeling in the future we'll be able to catch, even younger perhaps. And that I think is wonderful, because, I struggled first through fifth grade just because they didn't know how I learned that. And as soon as they figured it out, my life changed. I could start being taught the way that my brain was hardwired.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well,
really
obviously, to be able to understand what you've told us and to communicate it to other people so that they might be able to apply that understanding and make their children's lives better. That is a genius right there. So ADHD, put a G on there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so.
Telling our stories. I had a funny experience. I was doing a radio interview recently, and the guy interviewing me said, "Would you mind reading a little bit out of the book?" And I said, "Well, I'm still dyslexic, and reading out loud is really hard." And it didn't even, he was such a nice guy. It didn't even occur that I can write the book, but reading out loud is still hard. So being able to just talk about our strengths and our weaknesses, I think, is so powerful. And being able to tell our kids, it's okay if you prefer to read with your ears. That's how I do most of my reading, frankly. I listen to most things on my Kindle. And, that's to be able to say that's okay. It's totally okay to learn that way. And if you want to read with your eyes, that's fine too.
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, yeah. You go to the Center for the Blind here in Ocala, and a lot of those people will say, "Oh, I just read the greatest book," and you know that they can't physically, with their eyes, read.
Right.
And they're listening to audiobooks, or like you say, the new technology with the Kindle, where you get that woman talk to you, because I got that same thing.
Yeah.
I love that woman. When I was a kid, I went to the Center for the Blind and Dyslexic, and most of those books were put on audio for people who are blind. And I was like, "Well, can I get them too?"
Yeah.
They're like, "Yeah, sure." And I was like, "Great." It doesn't make a difference. It's all the same.
Same material.
Same material, absolutely.
And the idea is you're getting information into your brain, and that's what thinking differently is. You think differently. Thank God we don't think the same. I think, real quickly, when we discovered, we as humanity, that the world was not flat, it was round, I have always said we should not have been surprised, because all of the planets are round. We should have not have been surprised. Well, the same thing with trying to understand the gifts that God has given you. If you look at every single creature, they all have a way to survive, a way to provide for themselves. Why would he have left humans out? The one beautiful thing he did for humans that he did not do with the animals is that he gave us all something different as a way to survive.
Yeah.
So what you have to survive, you just need to understand what you need to do, and that's your knowledge. That's how you use it. So
Hey, I don't know if it's too heavy for 11 a.m., but I think you're talking about the awesomeness of humanity right there, and I'm game.
The awesomeness of humanity.
That'll be your next
right.
book.
Yeah.
The awesomeness of humanity. You want to co-author with me, Robin?
What I want to do is give away the copy of the book you sent to me. So call me if you want the book. It's called Thinking Differently. You are welcome to the copy that was sent to us. We'll put your name on it. The rest of us have to go buy it before we run out of time. Let me give this one away first, and we'll find out how we can buy it.
Okay.
Good morning. You've got the book. Who's this?
Ken.
Ken, do you know where we are?
Yes, I do.
We're in the mall. Come by and pick it up. It'll be waiting for you.
No, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ken. All right, David,
Awesome.
what's your website?
You can find us on eye2eyenational.org or davidflink.com.
David Flink, F as in Frank, LINK.com, davidflink.com. And I'm guessing Amazon itself as well. David.
Amazon and everywhere books are sold.
Thank you, David. We've got to go. We'll be right back.
Fox News Radio, I'm Lillian Wu. No plea entered during the initial court appearance of accused cop killer Eric Freen, captured last night in the Pocono Mountains.
Ray Tonkin, the Pike County District Attorney, says Freen faces a laundry list of charges.
Murder in the first degree, homicide of a law enforcement officer, attempted murder,